When a serious crime is committed and the police need all the help they can get, there's one group of people they turn to time after time: the expert witnesses.
Expert witnesses are the golden thread that runs through cases that every single conviction needs.
An extraordinary army of men and women with the expertise to reveal the hidden clues criminals have left behind.
There are so many important pieces of evidence: paint evidence, glass, fibre evidence.
They search harder and look deeper using the very latest techniques.
If I can work out how old those insects are, that's going to give me the minimum time since death.
This is the inside story of how science helps solve some of the UK's most complex cases.
It really was becoming the last throw of the dice.
Nothing's going to bring her back, but she'd had the justice that she rightly deserved.
This is the story of the expert witness. Today, we reveal how analysis of soil finally brought some justice to the grieving family of Becky Godden.
If they can solve a cold case back 2003, then there's hope.
And we discover how a tiny stone was the key to solving a shocking attack in Greater Manchester.
It was a bingo moment. We knew it was definitely that shoe that did it.
Soil that has been recovered many decades ago can be opened and secrets revealed. One day we were approached by a police officer with a spade and said, "Can you help us work out where that soil on the spade came from?"
Swindon, 2003. Becky Godden is seen for the last time. She's just 20 years old. Becky was born in 1983. Her mum, Karen, remembers her childhood fondly.
Oh, she was a lovely little girl, really vibrant and very popular, had lots of friends. And then there's a picture here when she was bridesmaid at my wedding. She'd already started her struggle in this one. You wouldn't think so to look at her, though. She was bullied at school, and that led to a spiral in her life. And the next thing we knew, she was taking drugs. She left home, then she'd come back, and then she'd go, and then she'd ring me up, she'd be in trouble, then she'd come back again.
Over her teenage years, Becky's contact with her family became less frequent until 2003, when it stopped entirely.
So she was gone for a very long time. I used to say to my mum, do you think she's all right, Mum? Do you think she'll ever come home? And she said, she'll come home one day. But of course, she never come home.
Becky had been missing for 8 years when in 2011, police began investigating the disappearance of another young woman from Swindon.
A taxi driver has been charged with the murder of Sian O'Callaghan, the 22-year-old whose body was found in Oxfordshire on Thursday.
What Karen didn't know is that Sian's disappearance would also hold the key to finding her daughter, Becky.
CCTV captured her walking towards the headlights of a minicab. She was never seen alive again.
Detectives quickly identified and arrested the prime suspect in Sian's disappearance. Sean Memory was part of the investigation team.
Christopher Halliwell was a taxi driver in Swindon, but he'd had a long criminal history from the 80s of burglary and theft, and he knew the Swindon area very, very well. When Christopher Halliwell was arrested, he didn't want to speak. However, he was taken to an isolated location because there was some thought that Sian could still be alive. At that point, he decided to confess that he'd taken and killed Sian, and he took the officers to a location called Uffington and pointed out where Sian was.
At that moment, the investigation took a remarkable turn.
As they were just about to leave there, he said, "Would you like another one? I'll take you to another body."
Detectives suddenly found themselves in a very difficult position. Halliwell's words were in effect a confession to a different crime. The detective in charge was Steve Fulcher.
Steve Fulcher was in a really difficult position because when you get arrested, you're supposed to be taken to a police station where you're entitled to free legal advice. When someone says to you, "Do you want another one?" would the normal person just take them back to the police station? Most people would say, "Well, what are you talking about? Tell me."
He and I were in a particular moment together. Any intervention at that time could have broken that momentary bond, and he could have changed his mind.
Steve Fulcher was worried that if he did not act straight away, Halliwell might change his mind and the other body might never be found. So he let Halliwell lead him to a field in Gloucestershire, and there, Halliwell revealed the shallow grave where Becky Godden was buried.
In some ways, this is the perfect burial site. There's not a house in view. It's extremely quiet, and even today, if a car comes, we can hear it from several miles away. I'm almost certain that if Becky had not been found by Christopher Halliwell's assistants back in 2011 when he made the admissions, she would almost certainly would have been still here. Definitely meant that the family had some closure and Becky was found.
There was a knock on the front door, and my son went to answer it. And it still hurts today. I just had that gut feeling. Even though I'd convinced myself that it was Becky, when you're actually told it, the whole world is just completely shattered.
Halliwell was arrested for the murders of both Sian O'Callaghan and Becky Godden, but there was a problem.
You don't really know the law. You just assume that they've got them, they'll trial them, they'll put them away. But of course it wasn't as simple as that.
Because Halliwell had not been brought straight into a police station after his arrest for Sian's murder, his confession to killing Becky was deemed inadmissible in court, and the case against him for Becky's murder never went to trial.
It wasn't until really after Sian's hearing that I knew then that I had to ask everybody for help. And I remember standing on those steps and asking the media for their help.
I would like the full support of you all to help me get justice for my daughter Becky. Thank you.
In 2015, the police began a new investigation into Becky's murder. It was led by Sean Memory.
I just wanted justice. I thought it was grossly unfair that Christopher Halliwell had not been convicted of this offence.
Sean knew that this time the case against Halliwell needed to be built not on his confession, but on brand new forensic evidence. He was convinced this field held the key. So he turned to soil analyst and expert witness, Lorna Dawson.
It needed some objective evidence, something that was different, something that could be quantified on the basis of reliable evidence.
Sean began with a complete re-examination of all the evidence gathered during the initial investigation.
So in 2003, when he killed Becky Godden, he was living here. When this house was searched, several thousand items were seized, from bedding, clothing, everything in the garage, his bedroom, kitchen, bathroom. So I would imagine probably 2,000 or 3,000 exhibits came from this address.
But among the thousands of exhibits, one in particular caught Sean's eye, one which might, with Lorna Dawson's expertise, prove Christopher Halliwell was guilty of the murder of Becky Godden.
We're currently outside the house Christopher Halliwell lived at when he murdered Sian O'Callaghan, and this is where the search took place.
Sean was determined to build his case on forensic evidence, and one item they found would prove crucial.
When the shed here was searched, there were several items found, but critically, the spade with the soil on it was recovered. The spade itself just looked an old spade. It had a red handle, it was rusty, it wasn't a modern spade. And the soil was actually located in the join of the handle and the metal bit at the rear. It was stuck like concrete to the back of the spade.
Sean had a hunch this caked mud could have come from Halliwell digging Becky Godden's grave. It was a long shot, but photos of the field itself gave him hope.
This is sadly the deposition site, and you can see how hard the soil is and how shallow the grave was. It's a sad picture to look at because Becky was only buried 6 inches down. It's a really shallow grave. If you look at the colour of the soil and if you look at the aerial photo, that particular field is almost unique in that area, let alone anywhere else in the country. So a stroke of luck for the investigation that Christopher Halliwell chose that field to bury Becky.
Sean needed to put his hunch to the test, so he turned to expert witness and forensic soil analyst Lorna Dawson.
So we received the individual samples from these tools, and we examined them, we looked at them, we described them for colour and texture. Well, when we put it under the microscope, we are looking for any plant material, fibre, any unusual features. At this stage, you don't know what you're going to see in your sample under the microscope. Here we've got some grains, we've got some graphite, we've got these aggregates which are all quite similar to each other. We can narrow it down to the aggregates on these tools, and we then take them through the process for the organic characterisation.
Lorna's next step was to analyse the constituent parts of the soil in even greater detail.
This is a gas chromatograph. Gas chromatography is where the materials that we are looking to quantify are separated out. What happens with this is we change the compounds into vapours, so they become gases. They are then heated up in this column within the machine. They're separated by mass or size. And the detector part allows us to quantify how much of each of these compounds is in each sample. This was an orangey yellow soil, so it was quite distinctive. And the fact it was a corner of a field, it was quite unusual in its characteristics. So what we've got on this trace, green sample is the sample from the spade. And then we've got the pink line here, which is the sample from the grave where Becky Gordon was found. They are very similar. How much is in of each of the compounds from the field and from the sample from the spade.
Firstly, I didn't know whether the soil from the back of the shovel would have come from that field. That in itself would be quite remarkable that he used that particular shovel to bury Becky Godden. So we waited patiently for several weeks, and then I got that golden nugget moment and a phone call from Lorna. And she was able to say to me that a couple of the samples effectively were a direct match to the spade. And when we looked at those exhibits, they were the samples that were removed from the deposition site at Becky's body.
This compelling new soil evidence meant Christopher Halliwell could at last be tried for Becky Godden's murder. A date was set for the trial. It was the moment Becky's mum, Karen, had been waiting for. But Christopher Halliwell was now protesting his innocence. After all these years, it seemed he might escape justice again.
Even though you longed for that day, for that conviction, because let's face it, you have a trial. It was trial by jury. And then they've got to go away and they've got to make their mind up. So you go through all of that. You are really on tenterhooks all the time.
The jury took just 2 hours to find Halliwell guilty. He was then sentenced to life in prison.
it's never going to bring Becky back. Never. Nothing's going to bring her back. But she'd had the justice that she rightly deserved.
After years of legal wrangling, it was Lorna's soil science that finally delivered justice.
Lorna Dawson's absolutely fantastic, and without her use on this investigation, I don't think we would have solved it. And her knowledge and the way she explained it was just first class.
Science and technology had been developing that we were able to use to be able to show that the material on those tools had come from that location.
I think it's vital to not give up on these cases. Just because someone has been convicted and served life imprisonment, there's no closure for Becky's family. All they wanted to know and hear was someone to say that Christopher Halliwell was responsible for murdering their daughter.
Let me tell you, if they can solve a cold case back 2003, then there's hope. There's hope for all those other parents out there, or people that are waiting for their loved one to come home. There's hope. And Lorna, if I ever get the chance to meet her, I should give her the biggest hug and thank her for what she did. Yeah.
You might think that shoe treads are the same for a certain brand, but sometimes when you zoom in, you might find something that makes that unique. I would find sometimes patterns that other people would miss.
Droylsden, Greater Manchester, 2004. A 53-year-old man is found dead in his house. It looks like he has been beaten. Ruth Tully is a criminal psychologist who took a keen interest in the case.
Domestic violence is a huge problem in the UK. It's often a hidden problem, but it's one where I see perpetrators on a day-to-day basis. Vigilante attacks like this, thankfully, are very rare, but putting justice in their own hands clearly had devastating consequences for everybody concerned here. It was Easter Sunday. William Wilson, known as Billy, and his brother Anthony were out drinking in Droylsden, and they bumped into their mother's ex-partner. There were allegations that he tried to strangle her around a year before, so it was clear that there was bad blood between them all.
In fact, witnesses at a local pub remembered seeing Anthony and Billy Wilson arguing with the victim before Anthony knocked him unconscious. A few days later, the man was found dead at his home. It was a shocking scene.
The scene was very bloody, as though something very violent had gone on. Not just dead, but mutilated as well.
The police carried out a forensic examination of the property, searching for DNA of both Anthony and Billy Wilson. But, as retired detective Roy Lambert knows well, the presence of their DNA would not be enough to prove they were there on the day of the murder.
The public think DNA is the silver bullet, but it's not. These types of offences bring their own problems because when strangers are not involved, somebody may have visited the scene or the house where the victim was found in legitimate circumstances and left their DNA there. It's very important when you're building a case to know what the context of the DNA is. So it's where it was found, whose DNA is it, what access did they have to the premises, what access did they have to the victim.
There was one piece of evidence, though, that investigators were convinced could hold the key. So they called on forensic imaging expert Derek Tremaine.
There was a hand mark on the stairs on wallpaper. The handprint was in blood.
But when Derek was sent the piece of blood-stained wallpaper, he realised it wasn't going to be that easy.
The bloody handprint on the wallpaper had already been to forensics, and when I received it, it was like a piece of dish rag, to tell you the truth, and I couldn't do much with it.
The investigation was going nowhere, but Derek was not about to give up.
I was speaking to the officer on the case, and I said to him, you know, is there anything else? He said there was some footwear marks on his back.
Forensic investigators thought the footprint-shaped bruising on the victim's body was too small to belong to Billy or Anthony Wilson, but Derek wasn't so sure.
They're not experts in looking at injuries like we are, and they had sized it on a mark. It was quite a deep-looking bruise.
Derek was more interested in the more superficial bruising closer to the surface of the skin. This is known as intradermal bruising.
Deep bruising is more amorphous, and it also can spread. Intradermal bruising can leave very fine detail. It's very important when you're looking at something to look at the intradermal.
Derek now began a new analysis of the footprints, hoping to find something that others had missed.
It is puzzle solving all the time. There's a block there. You can see there's rings going down there, and there's some more parts of rings there. If you push down on your skin and lift it, it goes white. Now, what happens when a shoe hits it on and off like that? That blood gets displaced out quickly. So you might get areas of blanching either side. If someone's alive, after a time, very quickly it will repair itself. But if someone's dead, the heart's not beating, and then it will stay there.
It was clear to Derek that there were injuries that had been caused by an attacker stamping on the victim's back. Now he wanted to compare the pattern of the bruising to the tread of the shoes worn by Anthony and Billy Wilson.
When I got the images of the shoes through, I could quite simply see that they had all these rings and shapes. As soon as I saw them, I got very excited and thought that, you know, there could be a match here.
Derek was convinced the bruises were a match with a trainer worn by Billy Wilson, but that's not enough for a jury. Derek needed to provide proof.
So then I performed an overlay using the trainers. I made the trainer the same size as the injuries here, using the scales here, and then I put on several layers of the shoes in different positions. So you can then fade the layer in and out to see if it's made that mark or not. When I sized them, they matched completely.
For the first time, police had evidence that identified the killer as Billy Wilson. But the tread pattern on Wilson's shoes was very common, so could have been worn by anyone. Derek needed to find evidence to link the bruises to the specific pair of trainers worn by Billy Wilson.
Footwear is good evidence, but it's only good evidence if you can find the right boot or shoe. If you're lucky, as an investigator, it will be an unusual type of footwear, maybe an imported shoe or boot, but it also may have on the tread unique imperfections or unique features.
Shoes have all got the same tread mark, you know, a certain brand of shoes, but sometimes there may be something on that shoe that will make it unique.
This was what Derek now needed to find, and he began a minute examination of the tread on Billy Wilson's shoe.
I could see that there was a tiny abrasion in the intradermal bruise, which is just here. There's these tiny abrasions here, and when I overlaid the shoe, it came up exactly with a small stone that was trapped in the treads. Yeah, it was a bingo moment.
This tiny stone was exactly what Derek was looking for.
Obviously, a stone trapped in the shoe, making a mark, would make it unique. But the chances of another shoe having a stone in it in exactly the same place is pretty impossible. So we knew it was definitely that shoe that did it.
Expert witness Derek Tremaine had found evidence to lead police to the feet of the victim's killer. Billy Wilson was charged with murder, his brother Anthony for assault. The pair stood trial in 2005.
Because he was attacked so viciously, the offenders could not say it was done by an accident. Now, if you commit serious injury and the person dies as a result of those serious injuries and you intended to commit the serious injuries, that's enough intent to prove murder. It's not accidental, you intended, and you should have foreseen the fact that if you inflict these injuries, there was a distinct possibility the person would die. And that's what happened.
The jury found Billy Wilson guilty of murder. He was given a life sentence. His brother Anthony admitted assaulting the victim in the pub. He was given 2 years.
The jury heard lots and lots of gruesome evidence and circumstantial evidence in this case, but eventually it was a tiny, tiny stone in Wilson's shoe print that proved crucial. It's amazing how cases can turn on the tiniest bit of evidence.
If I hadn't have asked to look at it, it may very well have slipped through the net. Because I've been in forensic medicine so long, I said, let me have a look at the rest of the images, and I could quite easily see that, you know, these were pretty useful. It's great to be working on a case like this where obviously you help solve a murder as brutal as this one.